Welcome in, Hokies Nation, to your Valentine's Day edition of the Tech Sideline podcast. On today's episode, we'll talk Hokies men's basketball win over Notre Dame, their upcoming meeting with Georgia Tech in Atlanta, Hokies women's basketball asserting their dominance over ranked Florida State with Duke on deck Thursday, Virginia Tech softball and baseball is upon us, wrestling's hitting the home stretch, so much to cover today and not enough time, so we're going to get right into it. It's all coming up right here on episode 284 of the Tech Sideline podcast. Gets going right now. We record on Tuesday, February 14th, 2023, Valentine's Day, from the Tech Sideline studio at the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center right here in beautiful Blacksburg, Virginia. We welcome you in, whether you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you consume your podcasts, or if you're watching on YouTube. If you do happen to be on YouTube, make sure to go ahead, like, and subscribe while you're there, and also turn on the notification bell so you do not miss any future TSL content. Tech Sideline is presented by First Bank and Trust Company. They're giving away one free annual TSL Pass subscription each week from January through mid-March. To enter, hit the link in the YouTube description or find one of their ads on the techsideline.com website. Be sure to enter every week, and remember, who you choose to bank with can make all the difference in your overall experience. First Bank and Trust Company is the bank that puts you first. Visit www.firstbank.com to learn more. Gentlemen, I love you all. Happy Valentine's Day. Across the way, we got managing editor David Cunningham. To my right, lead analyst and columnist Chris Coleman. In the fourth chair, founder and general manager Will Stewart. Behind the scenes producing today, the best podcast producer in the land, Mr. Nick Brown. I'm your host, Giovanni Heater. Will, I want to throw it to you first because I know that you have some news for us. Our latest winner of the First Bank and Trust Company giveaway.
Yes, sir. Mr. William Lawson of Christiansburg. He's number 6 out of 10, and it's kind of a cool story. He registered for the site years ago, was a subscriber there for a short period of time, and hasn't logged on since 2016, according to his profile.
Interesting.
And I emailed him, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I love the podcast, yada yada yada." So he's glad to be a subscriber again. So that's kind of, like I said, that's kind of a cool story. Hopefully, when his 1-year subscription is up, he'll renew.
All right. Sounds good. Well, congratulations once again. Let's get into our first half content for today. I don't want to dwell on the Boston College loss as much as humanly possible. I know it's going to happen, but hopefully we can find a way to look at the bright side a little bit. Virginia Tech responds to that BC loss with a win this weekend over Notre Dame. They did it scoring a lot of points, but giving up a lot as well.
Yeah, the Boston College game, Tech just kind of looked flat. Boston College, I think, was just better. Notre Dame, Tech was good, but poor on the defensive end. When you have to score 93 points to win a game, as Mike Young said, that's not great. Notre Dame's defense is not very good, but Virginia Tech did not play great defense, period. I mean, Nate Laszewski and Grant Basile, matched each other with 33 points each. A road win is a road win. Tech's first of the year, so that's important. A loss would have been, just damaging. You can kiss any hopes goodbye. Tech's got 6 games remaining, and, who knows what's going to happen, but Tech's got some opportunities left to get some wins.
The Notre Dame game was pretty much just like the Virginia Tech Notre Dame game of the ACC tournament last year, which was 87-80 final score. That's just what those two teams kind of do to each other. They score a lot of points on each other. I think both coaches are excellent offensive coaches. I can't believe Notre Dame is 2 and whatever
in the ACC.
In the ACC, they have too many good players for that. They do not play a lick of defense.
Well, that's what happens when you lose to Georgia Tech.
David, I'm curious if you know the answer to this. It was said pregame that J.J. Starling was battling an illness and would not go. He did end up playing. Any specifics on that, or just who knows?
I have no idea. I believe Zach Mackey was the one who said it.
Right.
Said that he wasn't going to play, but
I think I saw your tweet saying it, right?
I was listening to Zach on the pregame, and he and Mike mentioned that Starling wasn't going to play, or I guess he just didn't start. He came in and played later.
Right. Interesting. I was just curious about that because you weren't the only one that said he wasn't going to play either. So I was curious about that. How about Grant Basile? 33 points in this one, 33 points against BC. We talked about how he's starting to figure things out. Now he might be one of the best players on this team, and I don't think there's much doubt about that. They need him down the stretch.
I think one of the biggest things is, and I kind of said this before the Duke game, Virginia Tech did not have for so long a interior presence like Kevin Aluma of last year, where opponents had to figure out how to stop him, right? Last year, when teams were scheming up against Kevin Aluma, they had to figure out how to stop him because he was a matchup nightmare, right? You had to double him, or you had to double Dustin Mutz because their post passing was so good. Grant Basile wasn't that earlier in the year. In the past 2-3 weeks, he has become a phenomenal player. And as a result, Tech's playing, I think, better basketball offensively, right? The ball's going inside and out and from one side to the other side. And it's not like the teams weren't necessarily sagging off Basile anyway, but now they're focusing more on him and opening up other opportunities. So he's become more of a focal point instead of a second option, if that makes sense. And I think earlier in the year, there were times where Sean Padula felt like he had to do too much. We've not had, and I think Sean Padula has grown and matured a lot, but we've not had a game where felt like Sean Padula has just forced a lot of stuff because we've had a guy like Grant Basile, as we've seen. He's showed up for Virginia Tech and played really good basketball, and he's been a focal point that everybody else can kind of play off of. So I think his emergence has kind of uplifted this offense. The problems lie on the defensive end.
I think he was an elite shooter from day one. I think it took him a while to figure out how to score in the post against a better level of competition than he was facing before. And now that he's figured that part of it out, he's honestly like the complete package offensive player right now. I'll probably just jinx him and I'll have 6 points against Georgia Tech. But, I mean, you can't go out there and score 30-plus points in 2 straight games and have 3 30-point games on the season unless you really know what you're doing. And it'd be one thing if, like, he was only scoring from the outside or only scoring from the paint. But he's doing both, like I said, so he's pretty complete on the offensive end, I think.
So, go ahead, David.
I was going to say, in terms of 30-point games in a season, that's like elite company. I mean, those are Malcolm Delaney,
well, it hadn't been
Bryant Matthew numbers.
It hadn't
right?
been done since Eric Green.
Yeah,
as far as 3 30-point games
in a season.
And Eric Green was the nation's leading scorer.
Yeah, and
Eric Green was an excellent player who got drafted, but at the same time, like, he was the only player on that team that could score. So he had to basically shoot on every possession.
Yeah.
Of course, he was going to get a certain amount of points.
Yeah, Grant Basile,
right?
This is an efficient offense.
Correct.
And Grant Basile is doing it. Yeah. I mean, Eric Green did it. Malcolm Delaney did it. Those are some elite scorers in Virginia Tech history. And then Grant Basile just casually comes out and does it in back-to-back games for the first time since Bryant Matthews in 2003. So it kind of shows you how good he's playing right now.
All right, so Notre Dame drops 87. We said that's bad. What is it, though, with teams against Tech just seeming to shoot the lights out? I mean, Leszewski's hitting shots from the logo, or like it's not like they were defending him poorly. Yeah, you got to get out on him when he starts hitting those, but you can only get out so far before you just start spreading your defense out too thin. And it's like they're just hitting these crazy shots, and it's not the first team to do that against Tech. So is it really something Virginia Tech's doing wrong, or like are they just getting these like Boston College? They were hitting everything. They couldn't miss.
I was going to say, I think Boston College and Notre Dame are two different animals. Boston College is not a good three-point shooting team. Boston College just shot well that night. Like that, it's just one of those things where team comes out hot and shoots well. Like BC was the second or third worst three-point shooting team in the ACC, sub 300 in the country, and just comes out and makes 12. That's just kind of like a what the heck moment, right? Notre Dame, that's how good Notre Dame's offense is, which is why, to Chris's point, how the heck does Notre Dame only have 2 ACC wins, right? I mean, again, the problems lie on the defensive end for Notre Dame, and that's why this is kind of a similar situation, Tech and Notre Dame, I think, and that's why it was such a high-scoring game, because both offenses can put up a ton of points, but Tech's defense has been better than Notre Dame at times this season, right? We saw it against UVA, Duke. but Notre Dame's defense has not been good for most of the year. So, but I think the big thing is that like that's how good Notre Dame is, right? For the first time all year, Tech switched everything because that's how good Notre Dame is offensively. They screen and they get open. You know, pretty much everybody on the floor can shoot threes. So you have to be efficient with switching. And Tech really wasn't on Nate Laszewski. Everybody else was fine. Like Dane Goodwin and Cormac Ryan, they limited Dane Goodwin and Ryan for most of the first half. In the second half, they switched 1 through 4, and Mutt stayed on Laszewski. But that's just kind of who Notre Dame is. And I think, you know, on Wednesday night, you're facing a Georgia Tech team that is, what did I put in my notes? 327th in adjusted offensive efficiency, right? If you can't play good defense against Georgia Tech, then it starts to raise some eyebrows.
Yeah, well, if you go back to Mike Young's era at Wofford, his entire tenure, and I've run these numbers in articles before, I don't have them off the top of my head, but almost every single season, Wofford was better in adjusted offensive efficiency than adjusted defensive efficiency. Sometimes like 50 or 100 spots better.
Yeah.
So Mike Young's teams have always been heavy on offense and maybe not so great on defense. I think 2 years ago they were really good on defense when Chester Frazier was here. He was a defensive specialist. I think they were still good defensively last year, even with the first year without him. But I think the longer he's been out of the program, the efficiency numbers are going back in the wrong direction on the defensive end.
I'd agree.
Some of that could be personnel to a certain extent. I mean, when you lose Naheem Aline, who I think was a plus defender, and he's replaced with first Darius Maddox, who is not a plus defender, and now MJ Collins, who can be a plus defender, but is still too young to be a plus defender right now. Consistently, right, exactly. He's a freshman. So I think next year, from a personnel standpoint, Virginia Tech should be a better defensive
But then
team.
you're going to lose Justin Mutz.
You're going to lose Mutz. I think you'll be better on the perimeter, though.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Some of that depends on if Couture comes back for his final season. But the trend throughout Mike Young's career, generally speaking, is that his teams are more efficient on the offensive end and maybe not so efficient on the defensive end. So I really liked the Chester Frazier hire, who was on his original staff, because Frazier was a defensive specialist who came from, the Illinois program, played against Virginia Tech in one of the ugliest NCAA tournament games in history. Didn't score a single point, but played great defense all night, right? So I think whenever an opening comes on the coaching staff again, I think it's really beneficial to have a defensive specialist. I think Giltner right now, Kevin Giltner, kind of seems like he's the defensive coordinator by default. You don't notice this if you're watching it on TV, but he's the one always talking to the team, standing up next to Mike Young, communicating with the players when they're on the defensive end. It's almost like he's got more defensive responsibilities than anything else. But Giltner came up in the Mike Young program at Wofford. So he came up in a program that offense was its strength and not defense, right?
And he does a lot on the offensive end.
Yeah, he does, but you see him talking more on the court
than anybody else.
When Tech is on defense.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So I do think that's an issue within the program, and it trends back all the way to Mike Young's years at Wofford.
Yeah, I think Tech would really run into a problem if Hunter Couture and Justin Mutz. Mutz can't come back, but if Hunter Couture didn't come back, then you're losing your two most veteran defenders, both of whom could be all ACC defenders. And I think losing Keve Aluma hurt a little bit on the defensive end too.
Yeah,
I think Grant Basili's had to take some time to grow into a defensive role. Tech's short bench hasn't helped. I'm curious to see when Rodney Rice gets healthy, how long it takes him to grow into a defensive role. I think that's just who Virginia Tech is. Virginia Tech's going to be better offensively than defensively, but Tech's not that bad defensively.
Right.
Where Tech's allowing teams consistently to shoot 45, 50%.
Yeah, they're kind of streaky when it comes to defense. They played their best defensive game at Clemson, and that's the game where they couldn't score.
Yeah. They played really well against Virginia too.
Yeah.
They did a solid job against Virginia.
Basile can come back too, right? If he wants
he
it.
can. He can.
Do you think he will?
If he keeps playing like this,
I believe that with what's legal in college basketball these days,
Right.
I believe it's possible for Virginia Tech to have the resources
Convince
to
him.
retain both of those players.
I agree.
You would hope so. That would make a serious difference in what they look like next year.
Absolutely.
But let's stick it on this year. With the Boston College loss, I kind of ask this question every time we get on here. What do they got to do to make the NCAA tournament? Now it feels like it is either win out or win the ACC tournament. Would you think that's a correct assessment?
It depends on what everybody else does too. I don't think you can sit there at 19 and 12 and say you're going to make it unless you make a big run. But if you get to 20 wins, like
And that would be 5 of the last 6.
they've got 2 more possibilities for quad 1 wins. So I would say
Miami and Duke.
you have to beat Miami at home.
Yeah.
Right. And ideally, you don't have to beat Duke on the road, but if you don't, you need to win all your other games.
I think going 5-1 with a loss at Duke and finishing 10-10, 20 and 10-10, 20 and whatever, 20 and
21 and 10. Whatever.
Well, yeah. Well, so Tech's at 15
21
wins right now.
11.
So Tech would have 20 wins and 11 losses. So I think it's possible. But here's the thing: if Tech wins out and Tech's sitting here now, again, a lot of it depends on how the pendulum swings in terms of who's a quadrant 1 win, who isn't. Right.
Mm-hmm. Right.
This is an ACC league, as Chris and I mentioned earlier, that like Ken Pomeroy has the ACC at like the 6th or 7th best conference, below the Mountain West.
They dropped below the Mountain West in computer rankings recently.
That's
this
incredible.
is a bad league.
A bad league, but it's also the most competitive it's been from top to bottom, as far as everyone's losing to
it's
everybody.
a bunch of middle of the pack teams playing each other.
Yeah.
There's no top team.
I would say
Even
and then there's
Virginia
one
is kinda-
horrible team.
Yeah, I think the one top team would be Virginia. Like Virginia would be the top team, but the problem is Virginia's been exposed too.
They're in the
Yeah.
top 10, but they're nowhere close to the UVA level that won the national title. Are they?
The one team that I would put money on as far as the NCAA tournament to like be a Sweet 16 caliber team is probably Miami.
Yeah, from a talent standpoint, I would definitely agree with that.
And Jim Larinaga continues to cook down there. But I think so. I think the problem is that right now, like Oklahoma State is a quadrant 1 win right now for Virginia Tech. Virginia is a quadrant 1 win. Okay.
Virginia should not drop out.
And and I don't think either of those teams are going to drop out because those teams continue to play well.
Carolina's done. You can forget about them being quad 1.
But Carolina is slipping, right?
But
At the moment, Duke's not a quadrant 1 win. And Miami could be, but Miami has to continue to play well. Now it helps that Miami got a quadrant. I actually didn't look to where Miami is today. Miami beat Carolina last night. But the problem is,
and curb stomped Duke.
Miami is number 30. They moved from 34
Miami's
to 30.
So the game in Blacksburg will be a quadrant 1 game if Miami
as
stays
of
up
today.
So but Tech wins and maybe Miami drops. So
then they drop
it's
as quad 2.
Again, it's a pendulum, right? You got to catch teams at the right time, and you got to hope when it comes down to it, they're going to be there. All Virginia Tech can do is take care of business.
Yeah, well, you got to beat Boston College, and then you don't have to worry about it as much. That was still, to me, inexplicable. I mean, Tech was wretched defensively in that game. I know Boston College shot a little bit better than they normally do, but they had a bunch of wide open looks because Virginia Tech could not get off screens for whatever reason.
Yeah, and it was bad communication.
Yeah,
too.
it was just like, I don't know if they just didn't take Boston College seriously or what, but I think Boston College is a well-coached team. I think Earl Grant is a good coach, but they don't have the personnel to come in there and beat Tech unless Tech screws it up. Tech screwed it up. So there's only one thing that disappoints me about this season. You can't control the Hunter Couture injury. I'm disappointed that it happened, but I'm not disappointed in anybody, right? But I am disappointed that they lost to Boston College twice. They should not lose to Boston College. So this season, when you look back on it, whether they make the NCAA tournament or not, they had some misfortune, a lot of which was out of their control with Couture.
But you can control the Boston College losses.
Yeah. Then the thing is, like, every team's going to have a loss or two where you're like, man, they probably shouldn't have lost that game. But Boston College over and over and over again. And it's one thing to lose to them on the road because they've beaten Clemson at home. they were within one possession of beating Duke at home. You know, they can knock some teams off at home, but there's no way in any universe that we should have lost to them at home.
How interchangeable, if you go 5-1 in the last stretch of the regular season, how interchangeable is that Miami and Duke game? Like, say you lose to Miami at home, but beat Duke on the road. It just seems like that Miami is more important almost.
Well,
because that's your quad one shot.
What's Duke in the net right now?
Well, it doesn't matter. Duke has to be top 75 when you're playing on the road.
on the road.
Duke will be a quadrant one win no matter what.
Technically speaking, if I had to pick between winning one of those,
you'd rather win at Duke.
I would rather win at Duke because that definitely stays quad one.
That was my question.
Yeah, and Duke is number 32
and that's a more impressive win.
Right.
At Cameron, even though they're not ranked.
No, but
that doesn't really matter.
The rankings don't matter.
Yeah.
Just the net.
Right.
It'll be a top 70. It would be a top 75 win on the. I mean, again, I think like that would be the more impressive win. But I do think like same thing I said when Virginia came to town. You have to take advantage of your quadrant one opportunities at home when you get them, right? Mm-hmm. And if you can win both of them,
it's great.
Right? Now the problem is, again, as we said before, you can't slip up in the games you're supposed to win, right? You can't lose to Boston College. You can't afford to do that. Virginia Tech could win 6 games in a row, which would be 7 including the Notre Dame game, and sit at 21 wins going into the ACC tournament and maybe still be on the bubble, like firmly on the bubble because of silly losses to Boston College. And that's the problem.
I think the 2 games you could beg to have back are second Clemson game and I guess the second Boston College game, but really either of them. Now, if they go 5-1, regardless of it's Miami or Duke as the loss, say they go 5-1, it almost feels like you still can't lose in the first round of the ACC tournament. You got to at least win 1 or 2, right?
Yeah, it'll depend on when Tech plays on. I mean, like right now, Tech's sitting in 12th.
Which is crazy.
Tech's going to play in the first or second game of the ACC tournament after playing on Wednesday. You don't want to play on that Tuesday, and if you've got, I would say you have to make it until at least Thursday, right? Which if you play on Tuesday, that means winning 2 games.
Quarterfinal.
Yeah,
Thursday,
making it to the quarterfinal. Again, like I think if Tech wins 5 games, the ACC standings will shift, and Tech will finish above 500, Tech would finish 500 or above 500, and Tech's going to be probably around 7th or 8th in the ACC. That's what my guess would be. So Tech wouldn't be playing on the first day of the tournament. But the problem is they're going to have to do some damage in Greensboro too.
All right, last thing here on men's basketball. What should we be looking out for against Georgia Tech tomorrow night?
Well, Georgia Tech is, again, not very good offensively, very good defensively. I'm writing a preview, of course, later today. Got a couple different transfers that Josh Pastner brought in. They've got they're not a great three-point shooting team. In all honesty, they score a lot of 2-pointers and give up a lot of 2-pointers. They defend the 3-point well. You'll notice that Josh Pastner likes to play man-to-man, but he also likes playing that crazy 1-3-1 zone that's a pain in the butt to play against. And as Mike Young said yesterday, they play well against it occasionally. They played poorly against it occasionally. Lance Terry, who transferred from Gardner-Webb, he was the guy who carried them in their win against Notre Dame, which, of course, Georgia Tech is 1-10 in its last 11 games. With the win against Notre Dame, that was at the buzzer, right? Lance Terry, he's 6'2". He's really crafty. He can get into the lane. He can score. A little bit like Sean Padula, where he can kind of create his own shot. Again, they're good defensively. They don't have a lot of length. So Tech, again, I think scoring points in the paint is crucial. Tech might not make a lot of 3-pointers just because Georgia Tech's 3-point defense is good. But they don't shoot as well on the road either. But the Hokies scored 42 points in the paint at Notre Dame, which was impressive, right? You've got to get the ball inside and out, and Georgia Tech's a little slow at times on rotations. And the other thing is Georgia Tech's slow in transition defensively. Left Dane Goodwin of Notre Dame open a couple different times in transition, which, if that's something Hunter Couture is getting, you would think those are easy buckets. So I think it should be a good matchup for Virginia Tech. The only problem is the Hokies, again, are 1-7 on the road this year. So, but they got a little momentum. If their offense plays as well as it did,
If they score 93, they'll probably win.
yeah, you'd win a lot of games if you scored 93 points.
I think in all my years watching ACC basketball, from now on back to when I was a little kid, I think Pastner's one of the worst coaches I have ever seen in this conference.
I would agree.
Shots fired.
I think he did not do a good job at Memphis, and they were trending down with him. And for whatever reason, Georgia Tech, so he left Memphis. Like Georgia Tech is not an upgrade over Memphis. There's only one reason you would move from Memphis to Georgia Tech, and that's if you're about to get run out of town at Memphis, right? They won the ACC one year, but that was when UVA got COVID in the ACC tournament, and the game couldn't get played, right?
And now, to be fair, that was a semi-talented Georgia Tech team.
Yeah,
Like,
but he's a bad coach. This is like Boston College, except a poorly coached Boston College. Virginia Tech should win this basketball game. I don't think Josh Pastner is a head coach anywhere close to this level.
I would agree.
They play routine. There's no reason Georgia Tech basketball should be in the cellar of the ACC every year. I mean, I remember when I was a kid, every team in the ACC was good. Even the worst team in the ACC, on the whole, was a good basketball team, and they were all well coached. This is how far this league is fallen. When I think Brad Brownell, who I always viewed as a middle of the pack ACC coach, but as more and more coaching changes have been made, and your Roy Williams have retired, and your Coach K's have retired, now I think Brad Brownell is one of the better coaches in the league. So he's gone from being middle of the pack ACC coach to one of the better coaches in the league because the overall coaching talent in this league has dropped off. And it's going to be interesting to see what Notre Dame does when Mike Brey retires. Mike Brey did not have a good end to his career. But are they going to upgrade? Are they going to be able to get back to peak Notre Dame level?
Yeah.
Because they were a really good program there for a decade or so under Mike
Sounds
Brey.
like you're talking about Syracuse a little bit.
Yeah, I mean,
I think it's
that guy's
the same kind of thing. And look what's happening at Florida State, right?
Yes.
Like
Leonard's almost, what is he, 73, 74?
Yeah, I think
Something looks 42.
I think
but,
that age. I mean, the only coach that's in that upper age that's doing well is Jim Larinaga,
Right.
and Larinaga is coaching his butt off.
He is, and that won't last too much longer because Leonard Hamilton was coaching his butt off up until
3 years ago.
Up until he started losing games.
Larinaga will win Coach of the Year unless it's Tony Bennett. Probably.
Yeah.
I would assume.
I would guess so. We'll see how Clemson finishes because
Pitt's got a chance for a
And
Coach
Jeff
of the Year
Capel,
too.
and Capel.
Jeff
And
Capel's
I
done a
say,
good job.
and Pitt's turned the program around
Yeah.
too. Capel's
of the
turned it
ACC.
around. But yeah, I think as a whole, the ACC is just like the bottom is down, and the top is down. It's competitive, but it's because it's squished like an accordion.
Yes, exactly. And when I went out to watch the game on Saturday, of course, on Saturday I had to leave my house and go to PK's to watch Virginia Tech basketball because it was on RSN. Thanks, Swafford. So I hung around for a little bit, after the game and watched some of Alabama Auburn. Alabama ranked third,
Number
in the country.
one now.
Yeah, number
Today,
one now.
yeah.
We've been talking about it for a number of years now, how eventually all this SEC football money and Big Ten football money is going to carry over into basketball. They're going to start using that money to Texas A&M hire coaches away from the ACC.
Yeah.
Buzz Williams, right? So if peak ACC, you could never imagine an ACC coach leaving the ACC for the SEC or the Big Ten or anything like that. Well, now they will because they can get paid a lot more money in those conferences
And have probably have better resources.
Right. So the lack of football money coming into this conference relative to those two leagues puts ACC basketball at risk. And it has put it at risk, and we're seeing the effects of this. Now, it still should not be as bad as it is. There's no excuse for ranking below the Mountain West in the computer rankings.
That blows my mind.
Right. So if you're behind the SEC or the Big Ten with their huge monetary advantage, it's completely understandable, but there's still no excuse for being behind those other leagues. This conference has to get better. Like Mike Brey, when he retires, has to be replaced well, and Notre Dame's got to start playing better. And you've got to see UNC play better than they're playing. You've got to see Duke play better than they're playing. I mean, those programs are going in-house to replace their coaches, and that's tradition for UNC, right? And it's great when it works with Roy Williams, but when it doesn't,
Yeah.
Matt Doherty,
Hubert
Davis.
was a disaster, and now we'll see about
Now, to be
Hubert
fair,
Davis.
yeah, I was going to say, to be
Hubert
fair,
did take him to a
UNC,
national championship.
Yeah, but they were mediocre all
Right.
year.
They were an
until,
8 seed.
Right, right. So, like, this is not... we sat in Castle Coliseum, right at mid-court seats. We have really good seats. And you watch Duke play and you watch North Carolina play. There's nowhere near the talent level that I'm used to watching from those teams.
Yeah.
Nowhere close.
Yeah, I think one of the big things is last year, the ACC, Notre Dame barely snuck into the tournament as an 11 seed and then won some games. Because I think relative to other teams in the country, right, if you're putting a Notre Dame up head-to-head against, say, a San Diego State, like this is the ACC, right? The ACC, in theory, should win those games, right? But Virginia Tech only got in last year because it won the ACC tournament. Notre Dame barely got in. The ACC was going to have 3 teams in. And now, of course, Miami and Duke went to the Final Four, or North Carolina and Duke went to the Final Four, and Miami went to the Elite 8. But the fact that the ACC probably was only going to get 3 teams in last year, like Virginia didn't even make the tournament. Right. And I think that kind of just shows you yes, it's a little bit better this year because it's more competitive, but that doesn't necessarily translate to, like, I'd be curious to see when an ACC team matches up against an SEC team like that or a Big Ten team like that in the NCAA tournament, what the heck's going to happen? I mean, there's a reason why the Big Ten has won ACC Big Ten Challenge for the past couple of years.
Well, actually, the ACC won it this year.
But
for like the last, 7 or 8 years?
It was a lot.
But how much that is so early in the season too that like barely matters.
Teams change. You're right. It doesn't. But the overall trend for the ACC, and I wrote this article last year during the season, there were a lot of years in a row where the ACC ranked number 1 and Ken Pom and Sager and all of that. And over the years, as the TV contracts have changed with the conferences, you've seen a steady decline of the ACC in the computer rankings. I remember about 8 to 10 years ago when the Big East passed the ACC. That was when they had, Syracuse was at their peak and Pitt was really, really good.
And Georgetown was really good.
Georgetown, all of those teams were really, really good. And then, of course, the ACC rated those leagues. And then just like that, Pitt loses their coach. Boeheim gets old.
Georgetown goes down the cellar.
Well, they're down in the ACC though. So I'm just talking about the teams the ACC added.
Louisville. I mean, think about Louisville.
Louisville won a national title.
Villanova is the only team that made it out of the Big East.
Right.
The old Big East.
Right. And so there are teams in the ACC that have a lot more potential than they're showing right now. But it's disappointing to see the quality of basketball in this league watered down.
Well, that just made me incredibly sad because it would take a lot of money and things out of anybody's power to change that narrative.
Some of it, but we could still be better than the Mountain West. That doesn't take any more money. Right.
That's true. That's a good point. All right, we're going long. I got one more thing that is related to this conversation, and I want Will to chime in too because the comment section seems to think that he's bored over there, I guess.
I got all kinds of stuff when it's my turn.
All right. I find it incredibly interesting that, and this year has shown it, like it took a minute to truly show the impacts of NIL and the transfer portal. This year of all years has shown that you can turn a team around and get really good really fast with this whole transfer portal thing because almost the entire roster for Pitt is guys that did not play there last year and came from other schools.
In Miami.
Yeah.
I think like those are 2 of the best teams in the ACC this year. And and it's funny that Jim Boeheim called out some of the other schools.
Kind of not wrong. He was wrong, but kind of not wrong. Like
I think you have to separate the NIL and the transfer portal a little bit. In some cases, they're the same. In some cases, they're not. We know Nigel Pack got a bag to go to Miami.
It was $400,000 a year.
I think it was.
I think it was 800
I think it was,
which is a lot.
Yes. That's a lot of money.
Yeah. There's only so many schools that can do that.
Not every single transfer portal player is getting that, right? But to your point about rebuilding teams through the transfer portal, Jeff Capel went out there and swooped in and picked up all these different guys. Miami goes out there and gets a bunch of different guys. Who's the person that just scored 33 points in back-to-back games for Virginia Tech. Grant Basile.
Their transfer.
Transfer portal. I think a lot of these guys, I mean, you're seeing, yeah, sure, you know, Kyle Filipowski at Duke is a true freshman, but you're seeing more veterans who have been in college basketball for a long time that were maybe at the mid-major level or transferred into the ACC having a lot more success than a lot of the freshmen just because they played college basketball longer.
Pitt, quote unquote, their best recruit coming in was Dior Johnson, and he hasn't played a minute for Pitt this year. And look how good they're doing without him. That was their highlight recruit too.
Darius Rice.
Rodney Rice?
Darius Maddox, Rodney Rice. The old Miami player back in the day when I was in college. It's always going to throw me off. Rodney Rice, our top recruit, 29 minutes.
Yeah.
Right now, that granted, that's because of
injury.
But
And
yes.
Dior is because of other things. He got into trouble.
Yeah.
Right.
But when you see UVA, you know, plug in Ben Vanderplas, right?
3 of Virginia Tech's 4 freshmen this year are redshirting.
Yeah.
What a beautiful shirt. I finally got to say it.
There you go. Yeah, I think it's changed. It's changed college basketball.
Will, what you got for us in the 14th?
All right, I got a lot of stuff. First of all, let the record show that when we were picking Virginia Tech and Boston College, I did not take the bait and did not pick. And I used to joke, this was football related, but I used to say I'm never picking Boston College to beat Virginia Tech. I used to say that about 15 years ago.
So you just didn't pick the game.
And now I'm totally back on the other side. I'm not going to pick Virginia Tech to beat Boston College. If you're not a Tech Sideline subscriber, you missed a quality rant. Was it Monday that I did it?
That was Wednesday.
Yeah, it was last Wednesday after Boston College beat Virginia Tech. It was a quality rant about Virginia Tech's got a BC problem. So we don't need to beat that to
So subscribe. Continue.
Yes.
I did not throw that out there for discussion. I just wanted to make the comment. So, let's see. What all have we got? Regarding the Coach of the Year discussion, let's drill into that a little bit. I think Capel, this Pitt's coach, he's got it in a walk. The preseason predictions were Pitt to finish 14th in the league.
Yeah.
They are currently first. So
True.
That's over. That's not a contest.
Yeah.
That's fair.
North Carolina and Duke were picked 1 and 2, and they are currently, middle of the pack in the league. 3 and 4 were Virginia and Miami, and they're up there. And then you get into Florida State was picked 5th. They're not having a good year. Notre Dame was picked 6th, which I find interesting.
They brought a lot of players back from an NCAA tournament.
And I love Notre Dame's players.
Sure.
It's odd to me that they're so bad this year. Yeah. And I think their biggest reason is they can't finish games.
Yeah.
And to that point, I put this on Twitter the other day. Sure, Leshevsky had 33 and Basile had 33, but in the last 16 minutes of the game, Basile outscored Leshevsky 24-5.
Right.
So that kind of points to Notre Dame's problem with finishing games.
Yeah.
I love their talent, man. And I always like their coach. So
I find it incredibly interesting with Notre Dame how I think coming into this season, Mike Bray didn't know he was going to be done. Because how do you get the biggest recruit Notre Dame's ever had? This is JJ Starling was their first consensus 5-star top 25 player to commit to Mike Bray and play basketball at Notre Dame. How do you get a guy like that? Granted, maybe he thought he was going to be a one and done, which he probably won't be. He's averaging like 12 points a game. Probably not going to be a one and done. Probably he'll transfer, to be honest, if Mike Bray's leaving. But how do you get a recruiting class like that? And I just don't think Bray thought he was going to be done.
It'll be interesting to see like what happened to the Notre Dame program. They were so good for so long under Mike Bray. Remember Virginia Tech tried to hire him when he was at Delaware.
Yeah.
And we ended up hiring Ricky Stokes instead.
So the story is that Jim Weaver actually had a sit down with Mike Bray, and Mike Bray found out the salary, and he said, "That's funny, but I will give you some advice on how to hire a coach."
I'll stay at
and
Delaware.
Weaver went out and hired Ricky Stokes anyway.
Then there we are. So anyway, they were so good. I mean, they were always one of my favorite teams to watch play. Just with their style of play was so entertaining. They had good talent, but like not elite talent. Just thought he ran that program in a
They made the most of their talent.
Right. They were like a more entertaining UVA, to be honest with you.
But they played some bully ball. Like, you remember like Bonzie Colson?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But my main point is here, what happened to them? It's like they went from being like an Elite 8, Sweet 16 team every year to like winning 14, 15 games like overnight.
Yeah. And it's crazy. I mean, Notre Dame's got talent. I picked Notre Dame to finish 6th or 7th, right around, because Tech was picked 7th or 8th.
Tech was picked 7th.
Yeah. I had Florida State way down there because I did not think, Florida State was going to be any good, which...
So you got the Hokies at 7th, and they're currently 12th in the league. Syracuse was picked 8th. They're hanging around there. Wake was picked 9th, and they are better than that. They look like they're about 6th as I scan the NC State 10th. They're up there at 5th in the conference.
Yeah.
Clemson was picked 11th, and of course we know where they are. They're number 3 right now behind Pitt and UVA. Then you got Louisville, Boston College, Pitt, as we discussed, and Georgia Tech. So Louisville's even worse than people thought.
That boggles my mind too. Like, how does that happen?
First year head coach, but yeah, I don't know.
Well,
But still,
That should never happen at Louisville.
Correct.
like it's
that may also be a
3
culture
wins?
problem similar to Miami football. But yeah, you're right. That's
3 wins?
excessively
That's
bad.
insane. Like, it's Louisville basketball.
I would guess that absolute worst, Louisville basketball would win like 12 or 13 games in a season, and that would be their floor.
Yeah, I agree.
But
If
3
that,
wins?
like, it's Louisville. I don't know.
Like Radford could play their schedule and have a better record.
Yeah, so I can't explain it. I just hope they don't bite Tech on the butt when that game happens. Because as we talked about before we went on
Is
there.
that the last game of the season?
No. If Tech loses
second
that
to
game,
last.
that'll be Virginia Tech. That won't have a thing to do with Louisville.
That second to last.
That's what you said.
Second to last?
All right, so let's. Interesting. Somebody posted switching to football. Somebody posted Bill Connolly's S&P Plus. So let me find that on my phone here. Give me a second. So Virginia Tech is 69th in Bill Connolly's S&P Plus, and going through the Tech schedule. So Virginia Tech is 69th. ODU is 118. ODU is almost Boston College level. It just doesn't matter. But the game is at home. Purdue's 49. Kind of a surprise.
I mean, they just played in a Big Ten championship.
Yeah. Rutgers is 83. I saw Rutgers on TV last year, and whether they're a good football team or not, they look like a football team. I know that's a weird thing to say. Marshall 74.
Okay.
Pitt 40. FSU 11.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Wake 52. Syracuse 59. NC State 46. Louisville 36.
I don't mean to interrupt. Is
ahead.
this essentially a preseason rankings is what this is, or what is this?
Based on his S&P Plus formula, Chris, what do you know about that? It's an efficiency metric,
I've
right?
always wondered how it gets computed before the season starts. I'm a big believer in it once the games start getting played and the data starts to get added up. Yeah. I have no idea, especially in the era of the transfer portal,
when rosters are turning over like that,
how he computes his preseason rankings. So honestly, I don't pay any attention to them.
Most places will probably have Florida State like top 5 or top 8 at least, probably.
Yeah. What? No. Where does he have Florida State?
11th.
Where's 11th?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Will. Keep going.
So you got Boston College 72 and UVA 76. I don't know about UVA. I mean, they
seem a lot worse than that to
really
me.
rough road. Yeah, because they lost Brennan Armstrong, lost Kemp. Lost another wide receiver. I think that team's looking like they've been gutted. So thought I'd throw that out there because I thought it was interesting. Let's see.
Tech 69th, you said? 59.
Yes, 69.
Okay.
So one last thing I wanted to talk about, and I actually talked about this from the fourth chair last time, how Grant Basile was improving his scoring average, and it took a big jump with 2 33-point games in a row. So as I talked about last time, he scored 4 points against NC State, and at that point in time, he was averaging 13.2 points per game. He's now up to 16.3. So he's gone from 13.2 to 16.3 over a 9-game stretch. And with this last game, he actually took over the Virginia Tech scoring lead at 16.3 points per game. Basile, if you remember, he started out with a 30-point game. And once things started to settle down, Padula became the leading scorer on the team in Game 3 and held that title, in air quotes, until after the Notre Dame game. Going into the Notre Dame game, Padula was 15.8, Basile is 15.6. And now after that game, Basile is 16.3 points per game and Padula is 15.6. So
interesting.
Offensively, I don't think you can argue anymore that he's the best player on the team. He is.
Yeah.
So so I'll make one more point and then I'll get out of the way. This team, it's not fully up and down the roster, but if you look at last year, this team really started to get better when Maddox and Padula started getting more playing time and things started to click for them. And you got a guy in Basile, it's starting to click for him. MJ Collins he's not making a Padula type leap, but he's getting minutes and he's doing fine. So we'll see if it bears fruit, but Mike Young has again got a team playing better. You know, we'll see how it finishes out, and nobody can explain the Boston College thing, but you know, it's the second year in a row where you can see guys figuring stuff out.
I like that. Let's end on that real quick. Comparing Padula towards the end of last season to MJ Collins towards the end of this season, I think, one, they're very comparable. I think MJ's a better defender. And in some ways, I think MJ's growth has been more impressive than Padula's. Your guys' thoughts?
I think
and that does not include, I don't mean to interrupt, that does not include the jump Padula made this year. That's the end of last season when he started to play a bigger role and Storm played a little less minutes.
I thought before the season started, I was projecting some improvement from Darius Maddox. And obviously thinking Rodney Rice was going to play.
Yeah.
And then Couture and Padula coming back. I'm like, man, they can redshirt MJ Collins. Now he's starting.
Now they really need him. Yeah.
Right. So, which shows like the Rice injury, the regression of Maddox, and the fact that he's not here now. But if he came back tomorrow and played the rest of the season, I don't see him getting that job back.
Yeah.
He would have to start playing a lot better than he was. Collins just has a higher he's a better athlete, finishes better around the basket, has a higher ceiling as a defender, all of that.
I think at this moment he is a better defender.
Yeah, you could argue. You could certainly argue. I think he's got some work to do off the ball. But I would like if I needed if I needed a guard to get a stop at the end of the game besides Hunter Couture, I think it would be MJ Collins that I would have drawing the defensive assignment. So I'm impressed with his development. I really think he's done a nice job. I really hope they can. I don't want to get into next year too much, but I really hope they can talk Couture and Basile into coming back, because Rodney Rice is on this team. MJ Collins.
I like the guys
Basile,
you're bringing in. Who knows what they'll get out of the portal?
I don't know. They don't have. Maybe they need to go to the portal. Maybe they wouldn't really need to, because like Basile could play the 4 and Kidd could play the 5. So I don't know what would happen, but I'm just saying the core pieces are there, eligible to come back, with the exception of Mutz, and I really think they've got a chance to be an excellent team next year if Couture and Basile come back. I mean, this is a team that, if you look at the bottom half of the standings in the ACC, there's one team that doesn't belong there. That's there, and it's Tech.
Yeah.
Well, there's no way we're one of the bottom 5 teams in this league.
Some pretty lousy teams around.
Yeah, they're bad. There's no way we should be around them. We shouldn't have lost. We should have won one of them. We should have won the home game against Boston College.
Should have won one of the Clemson games.
Probably shouldn't have lost to Syracuse in the Dome. If Couture's there, I don't know.
Well,
Okay, but
you're 2 to 3 games better with Couture.
Yeah.
So this is a team that we're sitting here at 5 and
9
that could be 9 and 5 easily. And you bring that core group back next year and nothing crazy happens like another Couture injury, then they got a chance to be really good next year.
I will say this about the Padula thing that you just talked about. He really took a big leap up last year. I think something people forget. They remember at the end of the Miami game down in Miami that Couture hit the inbounds pass, Maddox picked it up and threw it in for the game-winning shot. What you don't remember is that before that, with about 1:47 to go, I think it was, Miami was winning by 8.
And Padula
Padula proceeded to score like 8 points, steal the ball, and feed Aluma for a dunk. I mean, it was the Sean Padula show for 2 minutes. I haven't seen MJ Collins do anything like that. He's playing well, but Padula single-handedly won that game at Miami last year.
I think the biggest thing is Tech didn't need Padula. Tech didn't necessarily need Padula to do that, right? Tech needed Padula to grow, but didn't like.
He never started a game last year.
Padula's scoring was a plus. It was like, oh, nice. Like we want you to come in and give Storm some quality play some quality minutes, give Storm a rest, and play Virginia Tech basketball and just not turn the ball over, essentially. And he came in and did more than that. Tech has needed MJ Collins to play every minute he has. And I think that's why, I mean, they're very similar, but I think Collins has basically been thrust in the spotlight. But there was no way, like if Padula, can you imagine Padula's numbers if Padula had ended up playing like 30-something minutes a game last year? Padula's numbers would be all over the place. Sure. Collins is playing 30-something minutes, and there's not really a drop-off. And I think that's impressive.
Yeah, well, all right. So Collins, you're right. He's needed to win games more than Padula simply because he's a starter. Yeah. So when he scores, what did he score, 10 against Notre Dame?
Yeah.
All right, so when he scores 10 points against Notre Dame, Tech wins on the road. When he goes scoreless against Boston College, that's one starter that doesn't score a single point. They lose.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm not throwing that on MJ Collins or anything. I'm just saying the role he fills for this team.
He had 12 against Notre Dame.
Okay, yeah. There you go. And then he scored a decent amount. He did a nice job against UVA. And they won that game by 6. So he's one of the 5 starters on this team, so he has to score. So when he doesn't score, Boston College, Tech loses.
Mike Young mentioned, was it the Boston College game was the first game he wore the mask?
Yeah.
Not right.
Yes, that's correct. And those masks, they're
obstructive.
They can mess your peripheral vision up.
He really didn't like that mask. And then Zach Mackey was talking about with Mike Burnup because I had to listen to the Notre Dame game because it was on RSN.
Right.
So I actually
you can log into MESN and watch it on there. That's what I've been watching.
Not if you're a Dish subscriber.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah. But I did hear a discussion about that. They took that mask after the BC game, had it redone and worked on, and he felt better about it. So you're right, Chris. That BC game, that was just
you got to throw that out the window.
The mask, so Tottenham had a player who had to wear a mask earlier this year, Son.
Yeah.
And dribbling is such a big part of his game. And when he was wearing the mask, it messed up his peripheral vision so much that he couldn't see the ball at his feet. Yeah. So he had to take his eyes off defenders to look down at the ball, and he never knew where he was dribbling.
And who knows what effects wearing that mask had on Collins.
Oh, when you're shooting, exactly.
Especially if you've never worn one before.
He probably couldn't see peripherally on defense as well as he's used to seeing, and of course, switching and anticipating things is huge.
Right. Yeah, I believe Zach and Mike said he broke his nose.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
That's usually why.
Right, so we have to start a guy right now with a broken nose. That's how bad the
But he's playing good basketball, and I think
12 points at Notre Dame.
He's a tough guy, yeah.
And he's shown that, like the going to the Darius MJ conversation. Of course, you have to credit Darius with being able to hit some massive shots that kept you in games that maybe you had no business being in. You know what I'm talking about? Clemson, Miami, whatever. MJ showed a little flash of that too against Duke. Hit the game winner against Duke in crunch time. Play fell apart. Probably was designed for Couture. Said, all right, I'm going to take this thing.
I think the biggest thing about Collins and Maddox, like in terms of shot making, is like Tech needed a little bit of a difference. Is Tech needed Maddox to hit those last year, right? Like sure, you could have had somebody else take the shot against Clemson, but he took it upon his responsibility and hit it. Against Miami, it was the Padula and Maddox show. Collins has not had to be that guy because again, when Grant Basili's scoring 30-something points, you just need to chip in where you can.
He had to be that guy when Couture was out, but he wasn't ready to be that guy. So we lost.
Yes.
So just like Padula wouldn't have been ready to be that guy playing 30 minutes a game last year.
Yeah.
All right. Last thing before we go, and I know I said the last thing was the last thing. David and I seem to always subconsciously argue back and forth whether we're going to say Maddox or Maddox. Sometimes I say Maddox, he says Maddox. This time we flipped it. So to clear it up, I talked to Brian Cox, the SID for Virginia Tech basketball, because a lot of people actually ask this question. Darius Maddox's mother says Maddox. His father, where he gets the last name from, says it's Maddox.
Okay, so we can say it however we want.
And Darius Maddox says, and I quote, I don't really care how you say it. So it's literally both. Now, I'd like to think that She married into the family, and his father would know best considering it's his family's last name. Regardless, Darius Maddox doesn't care, so we can just pick one, and we'll flip-flop it all the time because it's fun. Thanks so much for being with us. Don't go anywhere. When we come back, Virginia Tech women's basketball is firing on all cylinders, and Virginia Tech might be the best they've been in a while on the diamond, and it's not just one sport either. We'll tell you all about it, and we'll tell you why on the other side of the break. Happy Valentine's Day, Hokie Nation. Welcome back to episode 284 of the Tech Sideline podcast, presented by First Bank and Trust Company. The TSL podcast is also presented by our partner, brand new partner, Triumph NIL. Tech Sideline partner, Triumph NIL, NIL for good. Triumph NIL is a unique and experienced sports marketing agency specializing in building custom name, image, and likeness partnerships for student athletes with members of the business community and fans. Their motto, recruit, retain, reward. Visit triumphnil.com to learn more. All right, let's dive into our second half content. We were originally going to talk about in the first half, got on tangents like we always do. Let's talk Hokies women's basketball. Statement win over Florida State on Sunday. Again, Florida State was ranked 19th in the country. They're still a top 25 team. They held the best scoring team in the ACC. Florida State came in averaging 83 points a game, down to just 70. And I've never seen something like this game started, where all of a sudden it's 3-ball in your face, get a turnover, another 3-ball in your face. Florida State calls a timeout right away. I mean, that was kind of awesome.
47 seconds in. Yeah. I mean, that was like, if you guys remember the ACC tournament final where Coach K called the timeout less than a minute into the second half.
Right?
That's the second half. That's a little bit different. You just come out of halftime. Brooke Wyckoff called it 47 seconds in, and it was kind of like, oh my, Virginia Tech's playing well. Tech's defense really got him off on the right foot on Sunday, and when the offense is clicking, the offense is clicking. 8 3-pointers in the first quarter, most in a quarter in program history. That's really impressive. Georgia Amore continues to do her thing. She was named ACC Player of the Week on Monday. So that over the next 3 quarters, Tech and Florida State were kind of even. It was a little bit back and forth. But when you have a first quarter like that, that's what led to Virginia Tech winning. That was the difference.
So let's do a post-mortem on it.
Okay.
So Tech makes 2 3-pointers in the first 47 seconds, and Florida State calls a timeout. Whenever I see that, that makes me think that the coach didn't feel good going in. And Florida State had just played at Miami, right, a couple days before maybe, and Tech had a little bit of a layoff to prepare. So you could kind of see this come, but not the tune to 34-11 at the end of one quarter. Tech made 8 of 11 3-pointers in that first quarter. I believe they were averaging like 7.8 per game, so they got their average in the first quarter.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those things. Big, huge punch in the mouth, and the game's over. And I think Florida State actually outscored Tech the rest of the way, maybe in every single quarter.
I think Tech was better. I think FSU was better in marginally in each of the other 3 quarters, but it didn't matter. Just Tech won the first quarter by a wide
34-11.
Yeah, a wide margin.
And then it was 14-3 or 14-13 FSU second quarter, 22-17 FSU third quarter, 23-20 FSU in the fourth.
Right.
Tech still won by 14 points.
And sometimes if you're Florida State, that's just what happens to you is you show up and it's not your day and it's the other team's day and it's over.
So Elizabeth Kitley almost felt, I don't want to say a non-factor. She still had 11 points, 4 rebounds, but it was not her typical game. They didn't really need her.
Well, I mean, Florida State eliminated her. What they wanted to do was basically ice Elizabeth Kitley and hope somebody else can score the ball. The problem is Georgia Amore's playing better than anybody in the ACC as of late. She had 27 against NC State last Monday, which feels like forever ago at this point.
Yeah.
That was just 8 days ago. Had 27 then, had 25, earned AC Player of the Week honors. And, when Amore's clicking, the Tech is really, really hard to stop. And Kitley got going a little bit in the third quarter. But the other thing was she dealt with foul trouble for the first time in a long time. We have not seen Kitley specifically deal with a lot of foul trouble.
She played 8 minutes in the first half, right? Does that sound right?
Yes. Yeah. We've seen her deal with foul trouble for stretches, but we've not seen her sit like that. Like she picked up 2 fouls in the third and sat for a while. And then she came back in the fourth and got some buckets. But that's when Amore took over the ball game.
Right.
And I think we've seen it time and time again. Elizabeth Kitley scored like 45 points in the NCAA tournament last year. But the problem is Virginia Tech didn't have anybody that complimented her.
Yeah.
And when Georgia Amore is on, when Kayla King's hitting threes, when Taylor Soul's scoring the basketball, when Kiana Traylor's scoring the basketball, Tech's really good when other people are complimenting Kitley, and it just so happens that Amore has been really good the past couple of weeks.
Yeah, she's getting her Grant Basile on, you know, and it's one of those deals where, you know, I sat there and watched that game, and the announcers were fawning all over the Hokies, and you're right. When they got all those elements going, they're a good team. But it's a different story from game to game to game, you know, and they've got Duke coming up Thursday.
Yep.
Today's Thursday. They
Number
got coming
9
up
versus
on
number
Thursday.
11.
And if you remember, that's the last game against Duke. That was just a slugfest.
Yeah.
And that was a very difficult
Well,
game for Virginia Tech.
took Kitley out of the game.
And they defended the perimeter very physically.
And they frustrated Amore. And they took both Amore and Kitley away,
Yep.
which essentially left Tech with Taylor. I mean, Taylor Soul had a really good ball game, but that was it.
So this is a feel-good win, sure, but everybody associated with that program knows you got to put that behind you, and it's a whole different ball game Thursday night.
Yeah, so you totally brought us into our next topic of conversation. This is probably the biggest game coming up against Duke of the season to this point. You can make the argument that the Notre Dame game was a top 10 game, but that was one of the first ACC games on the schedule with so much ball to be played in front of you. Now we're getting to crunch time down the home stretch of the season. You're playing a top 3 team in the conference, and you're a top 3 team in the conference. This is a fight for, you know, who has a chance at first place and the top 4 with the buys in the ACC tournament. I mean, this is just a massive game. Might as well be a top 10 matchup. It's 11 versus 9. Looking to avenge a previous loss to Duke in Cameron. Tech shot 17 of 49 from the field against Duke the first time they played. Safe to say that probably won't happen again. I mean, 17 for 49 is a really tough game from the field.
Yeah, so let me tee David up here. Duke is 12-2 in the conference. Notre Dame's 11-3. Virginia Tech is 10-4. Louisville's 10-4. So you're right. This is
your
one of
top
those
3.
games.
Yeah.
That hugely important in the standings. And Duke is 22-3, and Notre Dame and Tech are both 20-4. So it's interesting to me in Tech's 4 losses, for the most part, like that Duke loss, that really hit me. I'm struggling with what I'm trying to say here. If the matchup goes south like that, you forget that Tech's a 20-4 basketball team.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because Duke played so well.
Yeah.
Duke is a team where if Duke is on and it's playing good basketball, it's insanely tough to stop, right? And it wasn't like Duke did anything crazy special. Duke just played better across the board.
Yeah, they didn't make 8 of 11 3-pointers or
No,
anything like
I mean,
that.
it wasn't like every single shot was going down. Like I thought Tech played good defense for most of the game. The problem was Duke, and I said this before, when Tech plays a team like Duke or a team like Notre Dame or a team like Florida State, they're going to play Kitley one-on-one. They might switch to zone, but a lot of times they're going to play man. Duke did not need to touch zone at all because that's how good the defense was against Kitley. And they guarded the fire out of Amore on the perimeter, and Amore couldn't get anything going. And it was like you took Tech two top options away, and Tech couldn't do anything. Tech made some silly turnovers. It was a sloppy basketball game, but you're also on the road. You get Duke in Castle Coliseum on a Thursday. You got momentum. You've won, 4 in a row? This is a good opportunity to make a statement, not just in terms of, we deserve a top 4 seed in the ACC tournament.
NCAA tournament.
No, well,
ACC, sure.
Tech, I mean, you win, this is a good opportunity to solidify a top 4 seed in the ACC tournament. And it's an opportunity to, get a little momentum more going toward, if you want to win the ACC regular season title. I mean, it's not out of reach right now, right?
Yeah.
But even more so, like you said, NCAA tournament, Charlie Cream, ESPN, has the Hokies as a number 3 seed in NCAA tournament as of today. We talked about it. I guess we didn't talk about it last week when the NCAA released its top 16 seeds. Tech was the 13th team in the country.
Which means they would be hosting the sub-regional.
Correct, yeah. This is an opportunity to, in my opinion, almost solidify. You win this game, you're almost going to solidify that you should be hosting an NCAA tournament regional.
Yeah. So we would encourage Tech fans. We don't usually do this, but we would encourage Tech fans to go to that game Thursday night in Castle. It's number 9 against number 11. Number 9 Duke, number 11 Tech. Tech owes them one. And now this game is Thursday at 7 o'clock. It's only streaming on ACCN Extra.
Right.
And so there was some discussion of that on the boards this week, and they didn't understand why the number 9 versus number 11 wasn't going to be on a linear channel. That's
You don't
want to
listen to Bailey Angle?
You probably got a lot of
nothing
men's
against
basketball
Bailey.
that night.
No, it's not that. It's I found when the ACC did their press release from September 28th, where they laid out the entire women's basketball schedule, and all of the television was decided then. It's locked in. Duke wasn't supposed to be this good. They
Again,
were picked
Duke was picked
seventh.
yeah.
So what is on the ACC network? On
North
Thursday?
Carolina,
North Carolina and NC
State.
State. They were picked 3rd and 5th in the conference, and Tech and Duke.
That's
were
a
picked
women's game?
Yeah, which is a rivalry game, and I think at the beginning of the year you probably would have thought, okay, it's going to be a better game.
Yeah. Those were 2 top 4 teams coming in, top 5 teams.
Yeah.
Carolina and NC State. That makes sense.
Yeah, so that's why it's streaming and not on a linear channel, because that was settled way back in September based on what they thought they knew about how things were going to play out.
Last question on women's basketball. What's the key for Virginia Tech to win this game in the Castle on Thursday?
Play good defense. I think Tech got a little bit behind the 8 ball early because it kind of let Duke get into it. I think play good defense, but controlling the tempo more importantly. I think Duke just kind of wasn't like Duke scored easy baskets, but Tech did not move the ball as well on offense and kind of let it slip away early. And Duke was you kind of always felt like Duke was in control. And Tech was, I don't remember if it was leading. I mean, it was like a 2-point game at halftime, and Tech was leading in the third quarter. I think led with like 6 minutes to go, and then Duke just ran with it.
Yeah.
And you got to control the tempo, control the pace. Tech has the players and the talent to win this game. You just got to play your basketball. And Georgia Amore, I think, is going to be the X factor again. I mean, if Duke can't stop her, and I think that was one of the other things, right? If Georgia Amore has a good game at Duke, Tech probably wins.
Yeah, despite all the struggles.
But Duke defended her really, really well. So I think how Georgia Amore plays will kind of decide the game.
So there's been the Hokies have been talking a lot lately about how they have switched from at the beginning of the game kind of seeing how the flow is going to go and what their opponents got for them to being the aggressor at the beginning of the game. So I'd say that's a key, be the aggressor. And one of the things that is not in their control is how are the referees going to call the game. They let them play down in Durham. If they don't let them play, if Duke comes out with that same hack-a-Kitley thing going on, and the refs decide to call it and bring the game a little bit more into control early, that could affect. This is not me whining about the ref show. This is just me saying that's a fact.
I think it was a big factor in Raleigh because NC State got in foul trouble.
That was the game I couldn't think of where. Right,
NC State got in foul trouble, and Wes Moore, the NC State head coach, is sitting there subbing in one big. Okay, she gets in foul trouble again. Okay, here's the other one. She gets in foul trouble, and it was in and out, and in and out, and in and out. And Kitley just continued to have her way.
Right.
And I think the biggest thing is other players are going to have to score. Yeah. Kitley's going to be able to get some. She's not going to have, she was 1 for 9 or 2 for 9 in that Duke game. She's going to be able to get some more buckets this time around, but you have to have the complement around her. And I also think, how physical it is, right? We saw it a little bit on Sunday against FSU. Kitley got in foul trouble. How much does that play a factor?
Right.
All right. You heard him. Get out to Castle Coliseum on Thursday. One of those things we talked about it a couple of times, like this could be really generational, something you don't want to miss, an opportunity to see a top 10 type of game, go see a team that might be one of the most historic in program history, an opportunity to go see them win a big ball game. So get out to Castle, make it loud, make it a true home court advantage like we had earlier in the season against Notre Dame, against Nebraska, some of the bigger crowds of the year. Let's flip the script. Let's get Chris involved once again, talk baseball. Wanted to plug, we had Carson DiMartini on yesterday, so if you haven't already, go check that out. He was a great interview if you're into Hokies baseball. Preseason ranked 14th in the country. They were picked yesterday to host a regional for the second year in a row. general thoughts heading into the season on Hokies baseball, guys?
There's a lot of talent back. You lose Gavin Cross, you lose Cade Hunter, you lose Tanner Schobel, you lose
Biddison's gone.
Nick Biddison.
Is Jack Hurley back?
Jack
Hurley's
Hurley's
back.
back. You lose Graham Fireved. And yet Tech reloaded. So Tech returned a lot of guys.
Got some transfers too.
Don't forget about Carson Jones. Carson Jones still there. Jack Hurley is still there. They picked up David Bryant from Radford, Chris Canizaro from Bucknell.
You got a pitcher from Miami.
Anthony Arugulas. I'm probably going to butcher his name, from Miami. He's probably going to be the Sunday starter. John Sheff told Chris Hirons that this is probably the best pitching staff he's ever had in his time at Tech. That's really good. I'm not really sure how the bats will come out, swinging. But you return a lot of guys too. Eduardo Malinowski, Christian Martin are both back. This is a good Tech baseball team.
Carson said yesterday that this team is it's so different from last year, because last year they were we talked about it. They could be down 8 runs and you didn't really feel like they were out of it. They had like these 8-run innings that were just like wild, and these high-scoring games that took 5 hours. And he said it's not going to be like that this year necessarily. They're much more pitching dominant. And on the outside, on paper, they lost some of that power on offense, but there are guys that are capable, and they do return. Malinowski was good. DeMartini had some really big plays last year. I mean, he was a really good bat for them. Hurley. But he said, look for lower scoring games because of how good they can be pitching. Chris?
He's right. I would say that's definitely accurate. I think the pitching staff is deeper. It's about finding everybody's right role early in the season. Who's going to be the Sunday starter? Who's going to be your long relief guy? Things like that. Who's going to be your Wednesday starter? I think getting those things ironed out as quickly as possible will be very beneficial. They won't score as many runs, but they'll still score plenty of runs, I think. Sheff has recruited well.
Yeah.
He's recruited well. And actually, their recruiting continues to get better, if you believe in the ranking. I don't know much about baseball recruiting.
Chris Hirons.
But there seems to be... Seems to be the general consensus amongst your baseball experts is that Tech's talent level continues to improve.
Yeah.
So I think they're going to be a good team again this year. DeMartini will have to adjust to move into a different spot in the lineup, most likely.
Right. He will still be at
He was
third.
the best 9-hitter ever.
So when they lost 11-2 to Oklahoma in the last game of the season, why did they have the 2 DeMartini homered?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
Sheff likes to have a good hitter in the 9 spot, but he's too good to hit in the 9 spot.
Yeah.
So he's going to be hitting, top middle of the order somewhere around in there. So he'll have to adjust to things like that. But, when you put him in there with Hurley and Carson Jones, you put you got to have those 3 guys hitting one, not necessarily 1, 2, 3, but they all have to come next to each other in the lineup, right? It's just a matter of getting the lineup right. Who protects who needs the most protection, things like that. You want to try to get maybe a lefty-righty split if you can. But on the whole, yes. Tech, to me, it looks like an NCAA tournament team again this year. I think I would say their pitching depth is really good. Their pitching depth in 2013 was really good. Like, I remember their weekday starter was this guy named Eddie Campbell. And Eddie had a good minor league career. He was one of those guys who, for any other year in Virginia Tech baseball, he would have been a weekend starter. But that pitching staff was so deep with your Joe Maniplies and guys like that it shuffled him back to a weekday starter. But I think the bullpen depth for this Tech team is better than that Tech team.
Yeah. So one guy we have not talked about, I haven't heard his name mentioned yet, is Drew Hackenberg.
So Griffin Green and Drew Hackenberg are both back.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so
that was like a given.
So we asked Carson before we started recording, so this isn't on the podcast he was on. I asked him about Drew Hackenberg, and remember Drew, didn't he start out 10-0 or something like that, and then he started to tail off? And I said, is that just because he was a freshman? And Carson said, basically, yeah, he went from pitching 30 innings a year to pitching.
Said about 90 last year.
Those are most innings he's ever pitched.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
and,
it kind of was a little
that's-
bit. It was the same for Green too. Not as much, but
Yeah,
a
and
little
a young
bit.
guy that starts to take the toll on the arm and the back and things like that. And of course, they never talk about that kind of stuff publicly. They just say, "Oh, he's a freshman running out of gas."
Yeah.
But it is what you thought it was. So he's now had his first go round with pitching that much, and it'll be interesting to see what he does this year.
Yeah, so like he and DeMartini were so good as freshmen last year, so now they have to adjust to the adjustments.
Yeah,
And you see that with rookies in the major leagues. You know, they come out, they start off hot, and then there's a scouting report on them, right? So they'll have to adjust to that. But Tech has good coaching, so that's not going to be an issue or anything. I'm excited to see what Griffin Green can do. Such a shame that he got hurt at the end of last season. And maybe
and what year is he, Chris?
I forget what year he is.
Carson said he's the hardest to hit on the team.
Yeah.
Harder to hit than Drew.
Might be a senior.
Right. Yeah, I think he's a junior. But I legit think if he'd been healthy, Tech could have won the national title last year. Tennessee, most people thought, was the best team in the country all year. The numbers indicated that they were, and I'm inclined to agree. But, you know, baseball playoffs, they got knocked out. That opened the door for Tech. It could have opened the door for Tech.
Unfortunately,
if Griffin
Oklahoma-
Green hadn't gotten hurt.
Right.
Instead, it opened the door for Ole Miss, who was, not seeded coming in, right?
Yeah, that's right. They
So-
barely made it in,
Right.
and then wound up winning the whole thing.
Yeah, so I think it's one thing to say you won you went to the super regionals and everything like that, but I think Tech was one injury away from potentially doing something greater.
Yeah.
In which
least going to Omaha.
case you're saying, yeah, we lost a lot of players, but we were in Omaha, or maybe even we won the national championship, so we're going to be fine. They were really close to doing that last year.
The biggest thing, Gio, I think, is essentially, I believe the only pitching Tech really lost from last year was Graham Fireved and Jordan Gieber, their Sunday starter.
Graham is a big loss.
Yeah, but you essentially return everybody else. The starters, Hackenberg, Green, and the bullpen. Kieran Higgins, Christian Worley, Jonah Hurney, who was fantastic in that game too of the Super Regional. This is a stacked Virginia Tech pitching staff. Obviously, there are going to be adjustments. How everything shuffles out in March is going to be interesting. But this is going to be, this is a really good team. And more so on the pitching side, I think there are more questions that lie kind of in terms of the hitting and the fielding than kind of opposite a little bit last year.
Well, let me ask a question. You guys are talking about the pitching staff. Was the pitching lab up and operational for last season?
Oh, no, it's just now getting operational.
Right. So you got all those pitchers coming back, and they have a pretty high-tech place to practice.
They have more resources. I think this baseball program has a chance to be really good. Like, besides the 1999 football team, I think last year's baseball team is probably... I don't know. There was one men's soccer team and one women's soccer team that made the Final Four. So maybe those three teams plus last year's Tech baseball team, I think were the closest Tech teams ever to winning a national title.
Softball last year was pretty darn good.
Yeah, but the thing is, that best team in softball is so much better than everybody else.
Right.
You're all playing for second place.
Dude, everybody's playing for second place.
Right.
So even you could be the second best team in the country and you have no chance.
Right.
Against Oklahoma.
Like
in
wrestling.
softball, right? Yeah. So it's like wrestling in Penn State. Right. I think Tech was very talented, but also like the baseball playoffs can be a gift and the curse, right? Sometimes they're great for you because maybe you didn't have a great season, but you still have talent and you get hot at the right time.
Ole Miss.
You're right, Ole Miss. The Braves, when they won the World Series a couple of years ago. Philadelphia made the World Series this past year. They finished third in their own division.
Yeah.
But still made the World Series. So it's about getting hot at the right time. Now,
UNC basketball last year.
Right. So at the same time, but if you're one of those teams with the best record and everybody's expecting you to win, but then you get upset, like it's like some people were angry. A lot of Tech fans, because Tech's generally not very good at baseball, they don't pay much attention to college baseball or maybe baseball in general. But there was some genuine angst and anger when Tech got knocked out last year, and I'm like, why is everybody so mad? It's the best team we've ever had. Like, this is baseball playoffs. This is what happens in baseball playoffs.
Somebody has to lose.
Right.
Right.
And then Oklahoma went to the national title.
Well, I remember,
series.
because I got frustrated in that last game because the Oklahoma pitcher didn't have very good stats on the year. But he was a young guy, and they'd brought him along slowly.
Oh, yeah.
Well, he was coming off Tommy John.
Yeah, and he was pitching his best baseball at that point in time, whereas Drew Hackenberg, whom we just talked about, was starting to tail off. And it's that kind of stuff that
That's
matters.
not what lost that game. I mean,
well, I'm just saying in general.
that's not what lost us a series. The game, I think if Griffin Green's healthy, that series never gets to Sunday.
Yeah.
True. Who pitched that? I'm just curious. I don't remember. Who pitched that last game? Because I remember I had a summer ball game, and I had to.
I think it was Gieber.
I was watching it while I'm calling a different baseball game.
I think Tech threw Green on Friday.
That's correct.
And Green got beat early.
He got beat, yeah.
And then Tech rallied, but wasn't enough. And then Tech blew them out on Saturday. And then the Sunday game wasn't really close from the beginning.
Well, I actually looked at the box score the other day. Oklahoma got up 2-0. Tech tied it on DeMartini's homer, bottom of the third, and then Oklahoma ran away from him.
Interesting. All right. Real quick on baseball, then we're going to fly through softball because I got to get to class. I hate to say it on the pod, but D1 baseball gave out their player rankings yesterday. Tech has some loaded guys. Second baseman, number 39 in the country, Eduardo Malinowski. Third baseman, number 5 in the country as a sophomore, Carson DeMartini, who we had on the show. Overall. At their position. At their position. Third baseman, Carson DeMartini, number 5. Shortstop, number 48, David Bryant. Outfielders, number 39 in the country, Carson Jones, and number 5 in the country, Jack Hurley. You have 2 top 5 guys in the country at their position on this team, and that was just field players. That did not include pitchers either. That will come out at a later time. So found that very, very cool. Moving on to softball, ranked number 9 in the country, 8 in the coaches poll. Will, I know you want to talk about Emma Lemley's pitching this past weekend. Hokies softball is currently undefeated. They started out their season strong. They beat Eastern Carolina 8-0 in 5 innings. UNCW, they beat them in their 2 games 5-1, 6-0. Beat East Carolina again 4-2. Beat Purdue Fort Wayne, where Nick Brown almost went to school, 9-0 in 5 innings. And now they have a huge stretch coming up with a bunch of top 10 teams
down in Clearwater, Florida. Yeah. I don't have a lot of detailed stuff to report, but I will tell you that Pitchgate is over. Emma is no longer lifting that foot. And I think she pitched 19 innings last weekend and 0 illegal pitches. And I saw a post by Chip Grubb on our softball board where he had the radar gun on Emma. I don't know if he was doing it for the facility or what. And he said that these numbers aren't exact, but he said that she threw something like 4 pitches in a row that were 68, 64, and 67 miles an hour, and then struck the batter out on a 49-mile-an-hour changeup. And I think one of you guys said she's been clocked at 71 miles per hour. Yeah. I know a lot of people don't know softball. 71 miles an hour is like 99 to 100 miles an hour in baseball. So this is really exciting stuff. If she has taken care of the foot dragging lifting problem, apparently. It was just one batter, but if she's added a changeup to her repertoire, this is going to get pretty exciting.
Yeah,
they're a good team. They've got a big challenge this weekend, big tournament, bunch of ranked teams, number 2, number 3.
Yeah, it's insane. It's a gauntlet.
Yeah, but I mean, you find out whether or not they're for real this weekend, and I think it's really interesting. Now, I do think the Kelsey Bennett injury. She hurt her ankle, I believe, or maybe it was her knee. I forget. Go read Chip Gubb's recap. It's in there.
Yeah.
She got hurt, and she's catching for Virginia Tech this year, and she got hurt in the first game on Friday, so the third game of the weekend. Luckily, Kylie Aldridge, caught well. For the rest of the weekend, and I think she'll be good. But just that impact, no Mackenzie Lauder back there anymore. So having somebody catch and building up repetition with Lemley, but also other pitchers, right? Bree Peck's pitching now too.
Yeah, that was interesting.
There's been a little bit of movement all around, but I mean, Tech still returns a ton of different players: Emma Ritter, Jamie Bailey, Meredith Slaw. Cameron Fagan. I mean, there are a bunch of different players that are really talented on this team, and they're going to be good this year. I think they're playing on ESPNU twice this weekend, so national television.
That's right. Yeah. I was looking at the schedule, so check the ESPNU schedule.
Just to fly through it, their first game, number 5 Oklahoma, then they'll play Nebraska, and then they'll play number 2 UCLA, then they'll play number 10 Arizona.
Wait, record scratch. Oklahoma's ranked 5th?
Oklahoma State.
Okay.
I apologize. Oklahoma State. Then they'll play South Florida. So that is about as much of a gauntlet and an exciting tournament there as it
So
gets.
what days and times are on ESPNU?
So the ESPNU games are the Oklahoma State game. That's Friday at 10 a.m. Interesting. And then the UCLA game is on ESPNU. That is Saturday at 4 p.m.
interesting rematch of a regional loss.
A couple of years ago. Yeah. So anything else on softball?
We're just covering the heck out of it. So
Yeah.
techsideline.com.
Absolutely. And I'm sure you're
I forgot to mention we've got for our Triumph Spotlight on TSL today.
Yes.
We are scheduled to talk to Emma Lemley next Monday. So that'll run sometime between next Monday and next Wednesday. So we'll get into detail about, the work that she did to take care of the illegal pitch problem.
One of the best pitchers in the ACC, probably even the country, just a sophomore. Emma Lemley is going to be on. And I'm sure you're sick of hearing us talk, but if you're not, Nick Brown, who's here all the time, myself, Kyle Marshak, we'll be broadcasting for Learfield all of the home softball games. I'm filling in for Evan Hughes on a couple of baseball games. So this is a year to get into the diamond sports if you're not already. When I came here, I was never into college baseball really, and last year was so much fun watching both the softball team and the baseball team. So with how good they are, if you're not already into tech baseball and softball, this is probably the year to do it.
It helps that they're both going to be really, really, really good.
And probably we'll both host regionals.
And guess what? We're going to cover it better than everybody. So TechSideline.com.
Wow. You heard it right there. We're going to cover it better than everybody.
Bold claim, but yet at this point, not so bold.
It's not trash talking if you can back it up, right?
correct.
It's not bragging if you can back it up.
No, yeah. Between all of us there, Tech Softball Park will be like full of Tech Sideline people. So that'll be pretty cool. Thanks so much for being with us today. We appreciate you. Happy Valentine's Day. We love you, and we love that you're always supporting us. So again, today's show was brought to you by First Bank and Trust Company, as well as Triumph NIL. So thanks so much to them, our partners and sponsors. That wraps things up for today. We'll see you again on TSL today later in the week, and we'll see you for the Tech Sideline podcast next week.